Ever wonder how our grandparents could whip up a hearty, delicious meal in just 10 minutes without microwaves, food delivery apps, or even half the modern kitchen gadgets we have today? Back in the day, quick meals weren't about convenience. They were about survival, creativity, and flavor that stood the test of time. These dishes came out of eras marked by ration stamps, the Great Depression, and families stretching every penny to make sure no one went hungry. Yet somehow, they still managed to create meals that not only filled the belly, but warmed the soul. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on the bell so you never miss another trip down memory lane. We've got plenty more nostalgic, budget-friendly recipes coming your way. Olive loaf sandwiches. Imagine yourself back in the mid-20th century when American lunchboxes featured a new staple, the olive loaf sandwich. This cold cut, blending ground pork, beef, and green olives, quickly became popular for its distinctive flavor. Assembling the sandwich was easy. Layer slices of olive loaf with creamy mayonnaise or tangy mustard, crisp lettuce, and sometimes cheese, all nestled between fresh bread. This simple yet delicious sandwich became a picnic and lunchbox favorite, often enjoyed with potato chips or pickles. It tells the story of how processed meats and cold cuts shaped American lunch culture, offering quick, flavorful, and varied meal options. Over time, the rise of fresh, health-conscious eating habits led to the decline of processed meats. However, the olive loaf sandwich remains a nostalgic reminder of simpler culinary times. Sloppy Joe. Another notable sandwich from that era is the Sloppy Joe, which consists of ground beef, onions, tomato sauce or ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, and other seasonings served on a hamburger bun. The origins of the Sloppy Joe are debated, with some attributing it to a bar owner in Havana, Cuba in 1917, while others trace it back to Sioux City, Iowa in the 1930s. By the 1940s, references to Sloppy Joes as sandwiches became common in the United States. These sandwiches reflect the culinary trends of their times, offering a glimpse into the flavors and preferences that shaped mid-20th century American cuisine. Ravioli sandwiches are an unconventional, playful lunch option that taps into the beloved flavors of Italian cuisine while embracing the convenience of a sandwich. These emerged likely in response to the popularity of canned ravioli introduced by Chef Boyardee in the 1930s. The sandwich involves placing canned ravioli filled with meat or cheese between slices of bread, which can be toasted or grilled to meld the flavors and add a textural contrast to the soft ravioli filling. Known in some places as Italian sloppy joes or ravioli hero, these sandwiches gained a following among budget-conscious college students and anyone appreciating the melding of comforting Italian flavors with the easy handheld format of a sandwich. Creamed corn sandwich. The creamed corn sandwich is a nostalgic reminder of comfort food from simpler times. This sandwich features creamed corn spread on buttered bread. The creamy sweet corn provides a comforting taste, making it a popular choice during times when ingredients were limited. Spread the creamed corn generously on slices of bread to create a hearty and flavorful sandwich. This dish reflects an era when homemade simplicity was highly valued. The creamed corn sandwich continues to be a comforting option for those who enjoy the flavors of classic American comfort food, offering a taste of a bygone era. Monte Cristo sandwich. The Monte Cristo sandwich is a classic American dish that gained popularity in the mid-20th century. It's an egg-dipped or batter-dipped ham and cheese sandwich that is pan or deep-fried, often considered a variation of the French croque monsieur. The sandwich can be savory or a mix of savory and sweet, sometimes covered in powdered sugar and served with maple syrup or preserves. Its rise in popularity is partly attributed to being served at Disneyland's Blue Bayou restaurant. Macaroni and cheese loaf sandwich. Bologna boat sandwiches. Yes, you heard that right. Bologna wasn't just slapped onto bread. Old cookbooks suggested frying thick slices, carving out the center, and stuffing it with cheese or mashed potatoes. It sounds quirky, but it was a kid-approved hit. Bologna boats were the ultimate budget-friendly fun food. They gave an ordinary lunch meat a makeover, transforming it into something exciting and warm. The fried edges of the bologna curled up like little boats, holding a scoop of filling that melted into the center. Kids loved it because it looked playful, and parents loved it because it was cheap and fast. For some families, this was Saturday lunch after grocery shopping, a quick break before tackling chores. The recipe captured the spirit of the era, making the most out of what you had, with a little creativity and a lot of flavor. Today, it might sound unusual, but back then, it was comfort food at its quirkiest best. Chicken pot pie shortcut. Back in the 1970s, families discovered that you could skip the long bake by using refrigerated biscuit dough and leftover chicken. With a can of cream soup, you had a pot pie that was on the table in record time. This shortcut recipe gave families the taste of homemade comfort without the long wait, and it was a lifesaver for busy moms. Instead of rolling out dough or waiting an hour for the pie to bake, they could throw everything together in minutes. The creamy filling bubbled up beneath the fluffy biscuits, creating a dish that looked impressive but was secretly effortless. For kids, it was always exciting to crack into the golden biscuit topping and scoop out the creamy chicken inside. This dish brought the same cozy warmth as a traditional pot pie, but fit perfectly into the fast-paced lifestyle of the 70s. It was proof that convenience didn't mean losing tradition, it just meant dinner came quicker. Spam and pineapple skillet Hawaiian influence met post-war practicality with this dish. Spam was diced, pan-fried with pineapple chunks, and glazed in a sugary sauce. Sweet, salty, and ready in 8 minutes flat, it was the true definition of fast fusion food. Housewives loved it because it was colorful, budget-friendly, and tasted like a mini vacation on a plate. Sometimes a splash of soy sauce or vinegar was added to balance the sweetness, making it almost like a homemade sweet and sour pork. Pair it with instant rice or buttered noodles, and suddenly you had a tropical-inspired dinner that felt adventurous, even though it all came from cans and pantry staples. Sloppy Joe skillet. The 1960s dinner tables often had sloppy joes. With canned sauce and ground beef, moms could whip up a big skillet batch in under 10 minutes. It was messy, tangy, and fed a crowd without breaking the bank. Kids loved how fun it was to eat, even if it dripped down their hands. And parents loved that it stretched a pound of beef to feed a whole family. Some thrifty cooks even bulked it up with oatmeal or breadcrumbs to make it last longer. Served on soft hamburger buns, it was pure Americana, fast, filling, and the kind of meal that left everyone reaching for seconds. Prune pudding. Prunes, being dried, lasted much longer than fresh fruit and were less expensive than many other options. Prune pudding was made by stewing prunes until soft, mashing them, and mixing them with sugar, spices, and a thickener, like cornstarch or breadcrumbs. It was served warm or chilled, sometimes with a dollop of whipped cream if you were lucky. This dessert may not have been a favorite for children, but it was high in fiber and could be made in large batches, making it a practical choice for big families. Many home cooks added a sprinkle of cinnamon or nutmeg to make it smell and taste more inviting. In some communities, prune pudding even became a potluck dessert, shared at church gatherings or community suppers when other ingredients were scarce. While it might not have been as exciting as fresh fruit pie, it had a sweetness and comfort all its own, a reminder that even the humblest ingredients could be transformed into something special with a little creativity. Egg drop soup. Egg drop soup was quick, simple, and nourishing. Water or broth was brought to a boil, and beaten eggs were drizzled in slowly, cooking instantly into delicate ribbons. A bit of seasoning, leftover vegetables, or even scraps of meat could be added for flavor. This dish was a perfect example of how 1 or 2 eggs could be transformed into a meal for an entire family. It was warm, comforting and easy to make even when supplies were low. Some households would stretch it even further by serving it over rice or noodles, turning a thin soup into a more filling main dish. Garlic, green onions, or a dash of pepper could elevate the flavor, but even plain, it offered a satisfying warmth. For many families, it became a go-to on cold nights or when illness struck, since it was both gentle on the stomach and easy to prepare. Cabbage and noodles. Also known as haluski in some Eastern European immigrant households, cabbage and noodles combined boiled egg noodles with sautéed cabbage and onions. Cooked in butter or bacon fat, it was simple but surprisingly flavorful. Cabbage was inexpensive, stored well, and could bulk up any meal, making it a Depression-era favorite. This dish was often served as a main course, but it could also be stretched further by serving it alongside bread or soup. Many families who had access to home gardens grew their own cabbage, making this dish nearly cost-free. In colder months, when fresh vegetables were scarce, a head of cabbage could be stored in a root cellar for weeks, ready to be turned into a satisfying meal at a moment's notice. Some cooks would sprinkle a little black pepper or paprika over the top for extra flavor, while others relied on the smoky richness of bacon fat to make it irresistible. Velveeta fudge. Velveeta fudge is not a myth, but a very real dessert that graced tables across America. The star ingredient is that familiar processed cheese brick found in countless refrigerators. The logic behind this unusual combination? Velveeta is soft, salty, and melts perfectly. When combined with cocoa powder, butter, and powdered sugar, it creates a rich, creamy texture remarkably similar to traditional fudge. Skeptics became believers after tasting it. Once melted and mixed, the cheese's flavor disappears completely, leaving behind deeply chocolatey, ultra-smooth fudge with a subtle, salty edge. During times when fresh dairy was expensive or difficult to store, Velveeta offered a practical alternative that didn't require refrigeration until after preparation. This recipe became a cherished family secret, passed down through generations with the caveat, "Just try it before you judge it." The unexpected marriage of processed cheese and chocolate demonstrates the creative problem-solving that characterized mid-century American cooking, finding new uses for everyday ingredients to create something surprisingly delicious. Sardine sandwich. The sandwich that cleared a 3-foot radius around you. Tinned sardines mashed with mayonnaise on white bread, sometimes with a squeeze of lemon if your parents were fancy. The smell announced your lunch before you did. Kids would dramatically hold their noses, but secretly, some were jealous of your sophisticated palate. The oily fish would soak into the bread, making the whole thing a soft, savory experience that you either loved or hated. There was an unspoken hierarchy to sardine sandwiches. The basic version had just the fish and mayo. The intermediate version included finely diced onions or celery for texture, and the elite version featured capers or chopped pickles that added briny pops of flavor. The sardine sandwich revealed your family's economic philosophy. Some saw it as a protein-packed, affordable option, while others viewed it as a delicacy worth the premium price of imported fish. The best versions had the sardines mashed just enough to create a spread while leaving some recognizable pieces for textural interest. By mid-morning, the sandwich would have fully matured, with the flavors melting together and the oils penetrating the bread to create a unified culinary experience. Bread soup. Stale bread never went to waste. Day-old or even week-old bread formed the foundation of this filling soup. Chunks of hard bread soaked in hot water or thin broth until soft, then seasoned with whatever was on hand, maybe garlic, salt, pepper, or dried herbs from the garden. A drizzle of olive oil for Italian families, or lard for others, added necessary calories. The soup filled stomachs on nights when the pantry was nearly bare, teaching children that even the simplest ingredients could become a meal with enough creativity. Immigrant families often brought this tradition from their homelands, with each culture having its own variation. Papa al pomodoro in Italian households, or sopa de ajo in Spanish homes. The transformation of hard, seemingly inedible bread into something warm and comforting represented the resilience of those who refused to be defeated by poverty. Women would trade secret ingredients between neighbors, creating community bonds through shared survival techniques that crossed cultural boundaries. Egg gravy. When a family had chickens, eggs became precious protein sources. Egg gravy stretched 1 or 2 eggs to feed several mouths. Fat heated in a pan saved bacon grease or lard. Flour stirred in to make a roux. Then water or milk added to create a gravy. Eggs beaten and stirred into the hot, but not boiling gravy, cooked in threads throughout, carrying egg flavor through the entire dish. Poured over biscuits or bread, the meal satisfied hunger while making minimal ingredients feed maximum people. Cabbage and noodles. Cabbage stored well through winter months, making it valuable when fresh produce wasn't available. Chopped cabbage sautéed until soft, then mixed with cooked egg noodles and seasoned with salt, pepper, and perhaps caraway seeds. The dish, sometimes called haluski in Eastern European households, filled bellies with minimal expense. The slightly sweet flavor of cooked cabbage paired with the satisfying chew of noodles created comfort in difficult times. The lingering smell of cabbage cooking became associated with tenement buildings and working-class neighborhoods, a sensory marker of economic status that some found embarrassing, but others embraced with pride. Homemade noodles often replaced store-bought when flour was available, but money was not. The afternoon spent rolling and cutting dough, becoming productive family time. The humble dish connected generations of immigrants to their homelands while adapting to American ingredients and circumstances, becoming a cultural bridge during difficult transitions. Hoover stew, named after President Herbert Hoover, who many blamed for the economic collapse, Hoover stew became a go-to meal for struggling families. The recipe varied depending on what you had on hand, but the basics were macaroni or other pasta, canned tomatoes, canned corn, and sliced hot dogs or another inexpensive meat. The pasta was boiled until soft. The vegetables and meat were added, and the whole thing simmered together in one big pot. It was cheap, filling, and could feed a crowd. Leftovers were often reheated for lunch the next day, sometimes with extra water or broth to make it stretch even further. Some families even tossed in beans, peas, or bits of onion if they had them, turning the pot into a true catch-all for whatever was in the pantry. In neighborhoods where families looked out for one another, Hoover stew might be cooked in a big batch and shared with a neighbor down the street. For many kids growing up in the 1930s, it was one of the few warm meals they could count on, a reminder of both hardship and the generosity of community. Mock apple pie. This is one of the most famous examples of Depression-era ingenuity. Apples weren't always affordable, and canned fruit wasn't always available. So home cooks came up with a clever substitute, Ritz crackers. The crackers were layered in a pie crust with sugar, cinnamon, and cream of tartar, which added a tangy, fruity flavor. Once baked, the crackers softened and took on a texture remarkably similar to cooked apples. The result? A pie that tasted surprisingly authentic, even without a single slice of fruit. It fooled more than a few guests at the dinner table, and kids often didn't realize until years later that they'd been eating a pie made of crackers. Mock apple pie became a symbol of resourcefulness, proof that even in hard times, people found ways to enjoy a treat. Families sometimes made it for Sunday dinners or holidays, saving up their precious crackers just for the occasion. The smell of cinnamon and sugar filling the kitchen brought a rare sense of comfort, even if the apples were just an illusion. Cornmeal, mush cornmeal. Mush was a staple in many rural households. Made from cornmeal boiled in water or milk, it was served hot like porridge for breakfast, often sweetened with syrup, honey, or molasses if available. If there were leftovers, they were poured into a pan, left to cool and solidify, and then sliced and fried for dinner or supper. Cornmeal was cheap, easy to store, and filling, exactly what families needed when money was tight. It was one of those foods that could be eaten at any time of day and was simple enough for even the youngest family members to help prepare. Many kids remember standing on a stool, stirring the pot slowly to keep the mush from lumping. When fried, the slices developed a crispy crust with a soft, creamy inside, a texture that made it comforting and satisfying. Served with gravy, milk, or even just a pat of butter, cornmeal, cheese and jelly sandwich. The poor man's cheesecake. Cream cheese spread thick on white bread with a layer of grape jelly. The sweet and tangy combination was a revelation before fancy flavor combinations were cool. It was like having dessert for lunch, and sometimes the cream cheese would melt just enough to mix with the jelly, creating marble swirls that looked as good as they tasted. The bread would get a little soggy, but that was part of the charm. Opening your lunchbox to find this sandwich meant your parent had taken extra time that morning, as spreading cold cream cheese on soft bread required patience and finesse. If spread too roughly, the bread would tear, resulting in a patchwork sandwich that tasted the same but lost aesthetic points. Different jelly flavors created different experiences. Grape was classic and assertive. Strawberry added a hint of sophistication, and the rare exotic flavors like apricot or blackberry meant your family had recently visited a farmer's market or fancy hat. The sandwich's appearance would transform throughout the morning. By lunchtime, the jelly would partially absorb into both the cream cheese and bread, creating a graduated color effect that was visually striking. In winter months, the cold classroom would keep the cream cheese firm, while in warmer seasons, it would develop a soft, almost frosting-like consistency. Egg drop soup. Egg drop soup appears in countless vintage cookbooks as a kindless comfort dish once prepared in nearly every American kitchen. This recipe, originally tucked between yellowed pages of grandmother's handwritten collections, represents culinary wisdom nearly lost to time. In those dog-eared cookbooks from generations past, instructions detailed how to transform humble ingredients into something remarkable by whisking eggs into a simmering broth, creating silky ribbons that danced through the golden liquid. The instructions were charmingly imprecise. A pot of broth heated until steam rises, with eggs added in a thin stream, while stirring gently to achieve the characteristic delicate texture. The result was a soup that combined the rustic simplicity of farm-fresh eggs with carefully crafted broths that simmered for hours. Often, handwritten notes and margins suggested additions. These forgotten poor man meals tell a story far bigger than just food. They're about resilience, resourcefulness, and the ability to make something wonderful out of almost nothing. Our grandparents didn't have convenience stores on every corner or takeout apps at their fingertips. They had gardens, scraps, and the determining. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell for more nostalgic recipes and frugal living tips. And let me know in the comments, which of these meals have you tried, and which ones are you excited to bring back to your kitchen? Until next time, keep cooking with love and a little old-fashioned ingenuity.